So I'm going to talk today about several different concepts and focus on how we can foster students today in their self-regulated learning in online learning environments, which all of us have forced to be. And I'm going to especially focus on the learning analytics approach and what it is and how it can be applied and how can we, based on these kind of measurements, develop relevant support for students to kind of assist them in these online learning settings. So for agenda today, I'm going to talk a bit about online learning, what is self-regulated learning, what is study success, how they are interconnected, how we have been measured and supported self-regulated learning before, and how we can do it now with the help of learning analytics. I will start with a definition of self-regulated learning, which may sound some complex concept for many of you, but it's a concept that has been studied for many years by psychologists, by education researchers. So it's not a new phenomenon. It's quite well developed, well studied, but mostly in physical settings, educational settings. So self-regulated learning refers to the process where students activate sustained cognitions, affects, and also behaviors that are systematically oriented towards the attainments of personal goals. And personal goals, in this case, in the case of educational settings, refer to the learning courses, to the learning goals of the courses, to the learning goals of the students who take part of the courses. Self-regulated learning is a complex phenomenon, and it includes students' use of self-regulated learning strategies, for example, strategies to manage their time, to accomplish different tasks, to set their goals, and to regulate their efforts on different learning tasks. It also regards their responsiveness to self-oriented feedback about learning effectiveness, which also requires their feedback literacy, how they can interpret the feedback they get. And it also concerns or regards the interconnected motivational processes. So it has to do with the motivation, with feedback, and the strategies that they have, that they deploy. So self-regulated learning, as I said, has been studied before, and it is associated with learning and academic achievement in educational settings. It's also a transferable skill that can be used in lifelong learning situations later on in job and other courses and programs. It also can be taught and learned. We are not born with these skills and strategies. Some of us probably, yes, that we are, but most of us not, and we can control this. However, research has shown that students are not always good regulators of their own learning, and it's difficult for them to accurately calibrate, accurately judge their own learning processes. So they may think that they know, but often they don't. So there is a need to empower teachers and learners to make informed decisions about their learning processes, and how we can do it today with the help of learning analytics, I will tell you soon. I don't know why it's going so fast, these slides. I don't push anything. They just go in by themselves. Anyway, what we know today, we know that the students struggle in online learning environments today if they don't use these critical self-regulated learning strategies. There are many studies that have shown that. Teacher presence is often low, and students need to structure better their own learning activities, which also suggests that we need additional support for students to become more successful. And online learning environments today, Canvas or what other platforms we use, they provide an increased access to new types of learning behavioral and process data, which refers to the big data. So where does this data come from? It comes from different learning platforms or environments. It can come from learning management system. In the case of ETH, we have Canvas. It can be Moodle, it can be It's Learning, it can be other platforms. Many researchers have been doing research based on the data available from MOOCs, because we have a lot of data there, from personal learning environments, virtual learning environments, and different types of online environments. So we have data, but what we can do with this data and how to access this data, it's another question. So as I said before, so self-regulated learning has to do with the study success, academic achievement, and improved learning outcomes. But how we define success? So success usually defined in terms of improved grades, but it also can be defined in terms of specific skill development. For example, skills to be a better goal setter for all learning success, skills to better regulate own efforts on achieving learning tasks. Also, it can be defined in terms of live learning skills. So we learn to be a better self-regulated learning, and we take these skills with us in other courses, in other programs, in other working situations. So if we can somehow develop these skills and not only look at the grades, it also regards as a study success. Research has also shown that students or learner ability to use self-regulated learning strategy is not static. It changes throughout the learning process. And how do we know how it changes? So frequent methods so far, mostly been measuring and still measuring, many researchers do that, SRL as a static ability by using subjective assessment measures. For example, they look at self-regulated learning as an aptitude through the self-reported questionnaires, so what they think they are, like how good they are, for example, in time management and effort regulation and so on, and through interviews. We also look at self-regulated learning as an event and more complex process-oriented measures by using, for example, think aloud methods or methods to detect errors in task and trace methodologies. However, recently research is recognizing the potential advantage of learning analytics as a means of examining and supporting student self-regulated learning. And I know some of you maybe know what learning analytics is, but I think most of you don't. So I will just shortly say what it is. Learning analytics refers to the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their context. And we talk about data, big data, log data, for the purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and also environments in which it occurs. So it's not only about understanding, it's about second part, which is also really important, optimizing learning and the settings in which where students learn. Learning analytics is about collecting traces that learners leave behind and using those traces to improve learning. So basically we have two main parts, its measurement and its optimization support, how we based on these measurements can develop effective support mechanism for the students. How we have been measuring learning evidence so far, or what should it achieve? It aims to improve learning outcomes. So if we can somehow show that these learning analytics methods can improve learning outcomes, that we have some evidence that it's successful. Also, learning analytics should improve learning support and teaching. It should be taken up widely and used, including deployment and scale. So we're not talking about learning in small specific courses. Ideally, it should be scaled up and done on a larger program level or university level. And also we should talk about using it in an ethical way in terms of protecting student data, protecting students, and enabling their agency. This is key propositions for the learning analytics evidence. So basically it's pretty complex cycle. It's a cycle consisting of different clusters, I would say. It's about data. And as I mentioned before, we have different types of data. It's interaction data, traces. It can be personal data from, for example, LADOC system, academic information. Different data sets can be aggregated in terms of providing relevant information that the researcher is looking for. The second part, it's about analytics, how we analyze this data. So we do use different techniques. We use pretty standard statistical analysis. We also use new methods as well. We use visualization. We can use social network analysis, emotional intelligence, multimodal analytics, and so on and so on. So there are many, many different ways to analyze and to explore the data. Based on that, we should interpret the data, and we do it for different purposes. Purposes can include prediction, for example, how well the student will do at the end of the course. We can do the early predictions. We can also do it for the purpose of intervention. So a teacher intervention in time can also improve their conditions to achieve a better course goals. We can also do it to provide recommendation on a individual level or group level or course level or program level in time. So not at the end of the course, but during the course basically. Also for adaptive learning paths for personalization and reflection and intuition. So like when you start doing this, you have to decide really what type of objective you have by analyzing this data. And based on that, you develop some optimized learning environments. You develop some support mechanism that can aim at different stakeholders. So they can aim at learners or students directly, instructors or teachers, so to help the teacher to understand how well the student is doing. It can also be aimed at researchers to help them to understand the process of self-regulation, how it develops over time, and suggest kind of interventions to help teachers to offer better support, and also on a larger scale, the education institutions on the curriculum level. But if you want to read a bit more about that, you can go to this article on learning analytics principles and constraints. So we have done some previous research. A couple of years ago, we did a big study based on 252 papers that we analyzed on learning analytics in higher education. And at that time, 2 years ago, we found that there is still little evidence that show improvements in students' learning outcomes. Only 9% out of 252 papers we found, as well as learning support and teaching. So the impact is still missing. We're still measuring. We are still measuring because we have access to data. So why we are doing learning analytics for SRL? So learning analytics afford opportunities to students to exercise, to practice SRL, for researchers to collect and measure the data about the learner and the environments where they learn, and for teachers to help them to develop the SRL. And using learning analytics, we can evaluate self-regulated learning strategies and learners' responsiveness to them. So what do teachers and students appreciate? They appreciate better understanding of their own learning behaviors and timely feedback intervention, which many students would like to have today in these online learning settings, personalized assistance and information that facilitate independent learning. Also, we can think about different levels, levels of micro, on like student level, individual level, where we suggest some individual intervention. On a meso level, on a group level or class course, adaptation of teaching strategies. So teacher can help the students to teach specific like goal settings, weekly, monthly, course related, so on. And also on micro level, we can integrate it in the curriculum of the programs and courses we have. So I guess if you ask the student about learning goals of the course they are taking, many of them really don't know that if they were not explicitly introduced several times by a teacher during the course. So if they keep this in mind all the time, I guess it will help them a lot during their learning process. So SRL requires a regular, continuous feedback during the learning progress to monitor progress and position, to adjust the strategies they use, to identify and acquire successful learning strategies, plan next learning steps, to keep focus, compare with others if they want to be compared with the others, so it should be cautional, and to motivate the learner. Last year, we did another study focused specifically on self-regulated learning and learning analytics in online learning settings. And we found out that similarly, 2 years later, most of this research was conducted to measure rather than support SRL. We are still there. We are still not progressing that much. And we also see that like 59% of the paper didn't suggest any kind of support. Those that suggested support, it was support in terms of visualizations, and I will talk about it very short time, and feedback and recommendations based on the results of learning analytics. So here we also still find a little evidence that it's good for learners, and it's interesting to know why we have so little impact so far, what is missing, and how we should go further with it. I will go further. So learning analytics for SRL, it's about calculation and recommendation. I will just show you some example that we did with their colleagues of mine who are present here, I think Mohammed and also Vard. So we used different type of learning analytics methods. We use sequential process map of students' SRL tactics. And we also looked at the top achievers and bottom achievers and looked at how they enable different self-regulated learning tactics in an academic writing course in university settings. And if you would like to look more about how we did it, you can take a look at the paper that we published at the end of the last year, which actually won the Best Paper Award for the conference. This is another types of learning analytics methods that we use. We use sequential clustering of learning sessions. We use psychological networks of self-regulated learning strategies. But I'm not going to talk a lot about measurement because I want to focus a bit on how we can, based on this measurement, provide support and develop support. So learning analytics is about learning, and relevant support mechanisms should be developed based on the learning theories as well as integrating them into the instructional design. So what type of learning theories we use? I can say that most of the support that has been developed so far and measurements were not based on any type of learning theory, which is a shame because we do have already a lot of knowledge behind that, that we should integrate into the design process, into the design of these technical tools. So in my research, in the group, we look at the Zimmerman's model of self-regulation that consists of 3 different phases where students plan its performance plays, then the forethought monitoring phase where they do different tasks and where then self-reflect. So it's a cyclical process that requires all the part of this cycle to be fulfilled in order to achieve the goals. If you would like to look at other different learning theories that existing, you can take a look at the article which is mentioned below, the Panaderos article, Review of Self-Regulated Learning. So there are other different models available for researchers. From the support that we have, the variety of the illustrated support is currently bounded to the web-based student-centered learning dashboards, which is a bit kind of limited, and they are not scaled. They're very limited in use as well for different reasons, and I will shortly talk about that as well. So we need another type of support. And in my research, we are looking at how we can use different mobile technologies, how we can develop mobile technology services to be integrated, be used by the students. So in one of the work that we have also done last year, or we've been doing a couple of years, we suggested a conceptual framework aimed at learner designers who can be hired by higher education institutions to assist specifically language learners with learning analytics for self-regulated learning. So as you can see here, the one part of that is based, focuses on the theory, the green part on the self-regulated learning theory, suggested by Zimmerman. Then you have a learning analytics part, which includes data analytics and action, and also have to take into account the mobile assisted language learning characteristics, so design characteristic, task characteristic, and contextualization. And also keep in mind how we should design in privacy in these different services or tools. We did also suggest an operationalization of this framework that can be used by EdTech companies, it can be used by the teachers, it can be used by the instructional designers at the universities. And all of these you can read in this article, which is published in the Australasian Journal of Education Technology, Learning Analytics Pathway to Impact. So what we did more, we also have developed or still developing within the frames of the project funded by Swedish Foundation International Cooperation Research in Higher Education, a mobile application, a mobile service, also based on Zimmerman's model, self-regulated learning. And this app or this service can help language learners to study language on a more self-regulated, self-independent way. So it integrates different types of scenarios, and also if you would like, you can read a bit more about it in the article also published last year at one of the conferences. Oh, sorry. So another example what we are currently doing, so we are I'm working with several students at both advanced level, different master courses. So we've been working in the course, visualization information course with Mario Romero. And we have developed a prototype, it's still not fully functional tool for supporting engineering student time management and goal setting skills work. It's a work in progress still. So what we are doing, we're developing a tool that can be used on the side by the students where they can set their own learning goals. They can also look at the progression of the course goals, set up different tasks and different times, and also look at the progress, how they develop like each day, each week, in order to raise their awareness in the first hand, how it's going, but also to take an action. So see how it helps them to, based on what they see, change their learning behavior and hopefully to achieve better grades at the end of the course or better skills. So as I say, also it's also based on that Zimmerman's model where they plan, perform, and also do some reflection at the end of the course. So this is hopefully something that, that's something that we will continue in the nearest future. And I also promised to talk very shortly, since we have a limited time, about learning analytics support, about learning dashboards that are known to improve decision making by visualization, by visualizing learning process and helping to track where learning process evolve as expected or where the potential issue may occur. And also we should keep in mind that we cannot design learning directly. We can also provide better conditions and better tools to learn in online learning settings. So what is a learning analytic dashboard? Probably many of you have seen, some of them probably not, but it's a single display that aggregates different indicators about the learner, the student, their learning process, and the learning context. It's a visual interface that captures and visualizes traces of learning activities in order to promote awareness, reflection, and sense making. Here are many examples that I just Googled from different sources. So you see there are like many attempts at different places. A lot of companies doing it, some universities, but they are not, most of them not open sources and not that easily can be adapted by, for example, KTH or some other institutions. So we have, when we develop learning interactive visualization, we have to think who is the user, what are the tasks we would like to visualize, and what is the data. Target users can be different. I would say it can be ATEM students to help them to understand how it's going for them. We can also design a dashboard aimed for an indicator for a teacher course, who teaches the course, to help the teacher to understand how it's going for this specific student or for the group of students. We can also help study advisors and researchers. So these are some examples to the right of these, some sketches that my students have been doing in different courses. They were trying to sketch learning dashboards based on the Canvas interactions, and I will show you some outcomes very soon. So this is one example of the student work that I have been supervising now. So the idea came actually from the student themselves, saying that we would like to see what we are doing in Canvas, how it's going for us. So they have been, they involved several other students in these studies to help them to design such a dashboard that potentially can be integrated in Canvas to help them see the progress. So this is one example. We had also another couple of students who also wanted to do basically the same thing. And it's really interesting why they came up with this idea. And they came up with this idea this year, basically, when we moved online, most of us. So they want to see the activities, they want to see them on a weekly basis, they want to see the content progression and results. And it's really important to involve these stakeholders when designing such tools, because otherwise we may end at visualizing something that they don't want to see to be visualized, and there will not be any kind of effect at the end. So important to mention that a visualization tool should actually generate the intended changes, and it's not only just show what's going on, but what we would like to achieve basically with this learning dashboard. So today what we use a lot of data from, as I said, learning management systems. We use, for example, average time spent on assignment pages, average duration per web session, average time between assignment submission, a number of assignment submission, and so on and so on. But should we believe the learner or not? So based on a study that has been conducted or presented last year at the Learning Analytics Conference, you see the reference there below, we should not. So they compared to what students actually told them how they learn, and they did the objective assessment based on learning analytics is not the same. So they don't obviously are not capable to accurately judge what they do basically and how they perceive they're doing. What we know today, we know that many of these dashboards today developed at learners. Many of them develop supporting SRL. It can be also developed with supporting collaborative learning, for example. Most common foundation, still very, very limited, is SRL theory. And dashboard often fail to support learners and translate the awareness into action to improve regulation. And I think therefore we need other type of support, not only a dashboard, we need a tool that helps them to progress and to practice SRL. And also a limitation that current dashboard designed to mostly support the performance phase of their self-regulated learning cycle, which is a limitation as well, since we miss a reflection process and we miss a planning phase, which gives the cyclical nature of the whole process. So it's it can be really like limited in terms of the effectiveness of the design tools. So what we recommend, or what the literature recommend today, is that these dashboards should be designed as a pedagogical tool that enhance awareness and reflection as a means of catalytic changes in the cognitive, behavioral, and also emotional competence. We should use educational context. We shouldn't reinvent the wheel, basically. We should learn from what we already know, probably not from the online learning settings, but from how students learn. Comparison with peers should be costly. We should probably think of customized learning dashboard that they can really choose how they would like this dashboard to look like. We shouldn't assume that the dashboard will have the same effect on all its users. It will not. And we should rather seek or try to explore which group of learners benefit from it most and how, and then try to make a more customized version of these dashboards. And with what I think is really helpful, that we try to, if we develop such a dashboard, we try to seamlessly integrate it in, for example, learning management system, not creating another kind of tool that they should keep, an eye on. So we should kind of integrate what they're doing now and what they're going to do later. And so far, many of these dashboards were focusing on evaluating also usability aspect only, which is missing actually to evaluate the changes that's going on in a student's learning behavior, which is also a limitation. But it's also, I think, it regards the limitation in terms of design aspect, how it was designed and what intended changes it aimed to enact, basically. So such type of evaluation should also use triangulation to validate its effects with self-reported data and track data and also assessment data and so on. I will skip this and I'm almost done. And also, I think we should always keep in mind when we think about, okay, we would like to visualize learning process, but what should we have as a pedagogical reason behind it? Not because only we have data available. And if we don't have this data available, we should think about how we can gather additional data, where this data should come from. And we also should involve stakeholders as co-designers of learning dashboards. as we can see from their published research, that learners are rarely consulted in deciding what information should be visualized and how it should be done. And as I mentioned before, it's a bit unethical to assume that we know what students want, what their concerns are, and how they would like data to be presented. So this is a participatory design approach that we are looking for. So what I would like to conclude with saying that there is a critical need to explore the LA support mechanism further, to be able to ultimately use them to foster self-regulated learning among learners for improved study success. And I guess we will not abandon totally online learning settings with the end of the COVID. It will be another type of settings, maybe more hybrid settings, more blended learning settings, but we will still be there, and we have students who actually need support in terms of succeeding better. So I think I'm done. So if you have any questions or considerations, please, I'm open for. I probably should mention also last thing that we are organizing a, it calls Nordic Learning Analytics Summer Institute, but basically it's a mini research conference aimed at the Nordic researchers in learning analytics at the end of August, 23rd, 24th of August. So whatever work in progress, workshop, interest you have, you're welcome to attend. We still hope to have it physically, but I think most probably it will be moved online depending how the situation evolves. But keep an eye on that, and there is a website that you can take a look at. So thank you very much.